Hello, I'm Connie Standifer, the author of When the Bow Breaks. And the moment we've all been waiting for is finally here. It's Friday, y'all, and we're just a few shakes away from our roundtable discussion on my book, When the Bow Breaks. Stay close.
And now let's meet the masters of the table talk. Once residing in Gainesville, Florida, but now Kitsy Carey, mother of two currently residing in Orlando, Florida. Renee Cartledge, residing in Atlanta, Georgia, is the mother of one and the proud grandmother of four. And Sabrina Jones, mother of three and resident of Stockbridge, Georgia. And the moderator, Barbara Cummings, mother of four, residing in Newark, New Jersey. Tag a friend and tune into insights and conversations of the Table Talk with author Connie Standifer.
Hello, my name is Connie Standifer, and I'm the founder of Push Publishing, Pray Until Something Happens, and the author of the newly released book, When the Bow Breaks. I'm a proud graduate of Bethune Cookman College and holding a master's in psychology and a master's degree in organization management with the University of Phoenix. And welcome you guys to the roundtable discussion. But before we get started, I'd like to thank you, Barbara, and Faith in Action Ministry for the opportunity to use your platform to tell my story about this little powerful blue book. I'd also like to thank my beautiful panelists, Kitsy Carey, Sabrina Jones, and Renee Cartledge. First, thank you so much for showing me your support in purchasing the book. And secondly, thank you for the opportunity to volunteer to share your story publicly. We are in unprecedented times. COVID-19 is causing devastation to families all across America. I want you to know today in the United States is 5.2 million confirmed COVID cases and 168,000 COVID deaths. Now I'm going to say that again. I want to make sure you catch that. With 5.2 million confirmed COVID cases and 168,000 deaths. That's serious, you guys. If you really think about it, that's somebody's mother, somebody's father, sister, brother, niece, nephew, cousins. That's somebody's child. When the Bow Breaks talks about the dilemmas that I faced coming to acceptance with the loss of my dear mother. In my book, I offer encouragement and simple techniques that you can use to gain some form of normalcy as you recover from your devastating loss. Now, after you know a little bit about the book, I kind of want to give you some background on the history of the book. I like to call it is where you're putting the icing on the cake. There were two women that were very instrumental in putting the icing on the cake for me with the Break. That's Laverine Johnson. She's the author of Victory After the Storm, and she also wrote the foreword for When the Bow Breaks. And then the amazing Deanna First out of New York City. She was instrumental in creating the cover, you guys, that you see. Those two ladies were instrumental in putting the icing on the cake. And I cannot go without saying that my husband actually was my backbone and the person that stayed with me through this whole process of doing this. So now that you know a little bit about the book and you know a little bit of the background story about the book, now I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful moderator, Miss Barbara Cummings. Thank you.
Well, Connie, I want to say thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I know that everybody is ready and they are so ready to hear what we have to say. I have the masters here and they are ready to give their insight and conversation with the Table Talk with Connie Stanford. We're going to talk a little bit about anguish. We're going to talk about sorrow. We're going to talk about grief. Connie, first, before I ask any questions, I want to jump right in and ask you, what really inspired you to write the book? I did see in the first chapter, it said My Perfect World. Can you talk about My Perfect World? Then we're going to go ahead and ask Kissy to elaborate a little bit about what perfect world means to her. Talk to us about that, Miss Connie.
Okay, before I go into my perfect world, I want to talk a little bit about what inspired me to write this book. Actually, believe it or not, Natalie Johnson actually inspired me to write the book. I actually read her book, Victory After the Storm, and we got to talking about grief and loss and so have you. And at that time, I had lost my mother, and she was talking and mentoring me over the loss of my dear mother. And it was her that inspired me to write the book. And she went a step further than just having a conversation with me. She gave me a journal. So she inspired me to write the book because she instilled a gift to me, a journal for writing the book. Now, I want to go into a little bit about My Perfect World. My Perfect World actually is the first chapter in When the Bow Breaks. And basically, I wanted my readers to understand where I actually was when all of the devastation took place with the loss of my mom. So I poured my heart into this for you to get an understanding of exactly where my mindset was, where my heart was, and everything. And I started it with A Perfect World.
Okay, Kid C, can you tell us what a perfect world means to you?
To me, Barbara, world means that everything is great. Everything has come together. There's no difficulty. You know, we find happiness wherever, whatever's going on in our world. We don't find any problems at all. So when we look at it, to us, it's perfect. To others, it may not look as perfect, but that's our perfect world. Whatever we grew up in, that's what we may not have had much, but it was what we considered perfect.
Sabrina,
Yes.
what perfect world means to you?
Perfect world means to me when life is all together. You don't have any complaints. The family is well. Um, everybody's loving, and basically that's it.
Renee,
I think basically just for me, it's just when things are going the way that you're accustomed to them going and there aren't any outside distractions. Basically, just perfectly perfect for you.
okay, the unimaginable grief and the loss of a loved one. Connie, I got to get this right, Connie, because if I don't get this right, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. Does not have to be infinite. The struggle is real, but you can and will recover. Now, when we talk about grief, we talk about sorrow, we talk about anguish, we talk about suffering. So, Sabrina, tell me, what did that mean to you just then? What I just said, what did that mean to you?
What it means to me that there's many stages of grief in life, and it consists of many emotions, such as shock, pain, denial, depression, and even acceptance. And another thing that I thought about too, sometimes people can be grief stricken and it leads to death. They're heartbroken. So that's what it means to me.
Renee?
I'm sorry. What was
The
the question exactly?
I was like the unimaginable grief and the loss of a loved one. It might be infinite, or it might be something that you think you can't bear. The struggle is real. Tell us about the struggle in that, in grief. Tell us about.
Well, the biggest struggle is that you sometimes well, not sometimes, but most of the time, with the different layers of emotions that you go through. Um, the blame game is one in particular, and then you always think that you could have done something different to for that situation to not have happened. Um, but if you certainly, I guess, go through the process and get over, get through it, God will give you beauty for your ashes.
Oh, you better go ahead on, Connie. Can you talk a little bit more about that? You put it on the
Yeah,
cover of the book. In fact, it is on the cover of the book. As soon as they get the book, and I know we're gonna have some people that buy the book tonight. Ding, ding, ding. Can you tell us why
Yeah.
you chose to put that on the front of the book? And Kitsy, we're gonna ask you next what that means to you.
I wanted to nail home the fact that when we're grieving and we love so hard, and when we lose somebody, that's a serious stab to the heart. Looking for the right word for it, but it is an unimaginable grief because you're not expecting it. Understanding that we're all going to die at some point. But if you're like me, I'm not walking around thinking, "Is this the day? Is this the day?" You're going on with your life. You don't know the time or the hour or the day. So when that happens, it catches you by surprise, and it is an unimaginable feeling to go through. But I want to tap on something that Sabrina mentioned when she talked about the stages, and I think Renee kind of mentioned it also. There are actually 5 stages to grief. And in those 5 stages, there's no set way to go. You don't have to go 1 through 5. You can go 5 to 1. There's no set way to go through it, but there are actually 5 stages. And those 5 stages are: acknowledge you're grieving. First of all, you got to acknowledge that you're grieving. The second is admit your grief will set off other emotions. Because sometimes when we're grieving through things, we don't realize that we might be a little on the edge. We may be coming off wrong or harsh to people, and we don't realize that when we're actually grieving. And thirdly, you need to understand that there's no cookie cutter approach to grieving. And then fourth, you got to welcome outside help from people who care about you. And the fifth is the most important: emotional care and physical care go hand in hand.
Kitsy, are you ready? Okay, so Connie, tell us a little bit about what you learned about writing this book. Tell me what you learned, and then I'm gonna come back to Kitsy.
What I learned about writing this book was, first of all, that I was a lot stronger than what I actually thought I was. And going through the loss of my mother, had you asked me I was going to be at this point a year from now, 3 years from now, 7 years from now, I would have told you no. So I think I learned in writing this book that I was a lot stronger than I was, and that God was with me. Although I felt like I was all alone, I was not all alone. God was with me all
Kitsy, the unimaginable grief and the
the
loss of a
time.
loved one.
I just needed to get outside of grief and understand that God is there with me, and He's going to take me to where I need it to be at some form of normalcy again.
Kitsy,
Yes.
I said the unimaginable grief, or even you could just we had some people, the masters, they talked about that. So tell us a little bit about what you learned about grief and what you learned about Connie in the book about grief. Because I don't know if anybody knows this, but you are in the front of the book. You gave a great experience of what you learned about Connie and actually what you learned about reading the book. So can you talk a little bit about that? What grief means to you, and then tell me also what did you learn? Oh, how have you experienced grief?
Well, what I learned is in with going through grief is that I'm not alone. And in reading Connie's book, I've experienced grief myself with the loss of my spouse. And being at a young age, I'm thinking that I was going to be married to somebody for the rest of my life and didn't have the opportunity to do that. So it was a tough time. And I thought a lot of times that I was going to go alone with that person. And I thought my life had ended as well. So through strength and time, I learned to be stronger. And I, even living with Connie, going through her emotional thing, I was strong enough to stand by her side, but even understand that she was strong enough to endure. She just needed to go through the process and still get this product to the people. She put it in writing for people to understand that you too can be as strong and you can get through the end and make it.
Wow, did you really sum that up? That is a great insight. Sabrina, can you tell us how have you experienced grief? And then Connie, tell us a little bit about are you still I don't want to say are you still going through it, but talk to us a little bit about what that is. And then we're gonna have Renee jump in right after you and say how she have experienced grief, sorrow, or suffering and anguish. And I can keep going, but I'm gonna stop. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Okay. As for me personally, my early experience in grief was with the death of my great grandparents at the age of 18 and 20 while I was away in college. And the initial emotion was anger. I was angry with God because they were my world, they were my voice. So back then, at the time, it was not prevalent for blacks to go to counseling or just seek outside help. So with me, I internalized a lot of it. It took a long time for me to get over it and to process it, because if you can imagine, at 18 and 20, you trying to still figure out who you are and trying to feel your way through life. So overall, I was able to come to grips over time and to accept it and to be able to move on in life.
So you trying to tell me is no time limit on grief, Connie? Renee, is no time limit on grief? You trying to tell me that? So
No,
we
No,
can't just
there's
get
no,
over it.
no.
no.
So Connie, Renee, what was your experience of grief?
I lost my grandson, one of my grandkids. He was 35 days old, but it felt like he'd been in my life forever. And one of the biggest, um, I guess, issues I had with it all is that I just felt like God should have taken me opposed to my grandson, and I just didn't understand why. Um, but I do know that God always has, He knows exactly what He's doing. So here we are, almost a year and a half later. I was blessed with another grandson that actually looks identical to the one that we lost, our little rainbow baby. So it was really really hard, and I think the hardest part was losing him, but it was even harder not being able to console my son to make it better for my son, because I'm always a hands-on mom, so I couldn't fix it, and that was
Wow.
that was really hard as well. So
Wow.
after months, I got through it, and we're good. We're good now, thank God.
That's good.
Well, Connie, you have some viewers and you have some people that are on. We want to say thank you to everyone that is viewing right now. We really appreciate you viewing this broadcast. But I want to step to the side like Clyde for a minute and I want to do something. And Connie, you didn't know I was going to do this, but we want to say happy birthday to Renee. Can we just say happy birthday? We're going to shift it for a second. We're going to say,
Happy
Renee, we love
birthday.
you. And we want to say, the world wants to tell you happy birthday, okay? So we're going to say happy birthday.
Happy
And I'm going
birthday,
to let
Renee.
Thank
everybody see
you.
who Renee is so they won't be confused who the birthday girl is. Yay, happy birthday, Renee. Okay,
Happy
so we're going to give
birthday.
that. And okay, so I guess that was okay. Connie, please forgive me for that. You can get me later on
That
for it,
was
but I just had to,
okay.
we just want to share the love with Renee. So, Connie, this is for you. A panel wants to know. Okay, what is she saying?
Thank you.
She said, "Is it expensive to write a book, and can she write the book herself, or can she?" She said, "Your book is self help. Can how you get help?" But
Okay. Well, first of all, it's really easy to write a book. As women, we all have a story to tell, and you should tell it. The hardest part about writing a book is actually starting. Once you get it made up in your mind that you're going to write a book and you actually start it, I suggest starting a journal. That part is easy. Once you start writing a book and you make a decision on what you're passionate about, I suggest that when you're writing a book, not only start with a journal, but find something that you're passionate about. That's the hard part, is starting to write. But it's not really expensive, and it depends on the route that you take. For me, I chose to do self-publishing. And one of the reasons why I chose to do self-publishing was I wanted to control my voice. Not only control my voice, I wanted to control the finance piece of the book as well as the profits of the book. So I chose self publishing. There are a lot of companies out there that will be more than happy to publish your book for you. But when you do that, you're giving up your rights to the book to a certain degree. So I would my advice to anybody that's writing a book, if you want to curtail the cost to the book, consider self-publishing.
okay, Renee, what did you learn about Connie in reading this book? What did you learn about her?
I learned that Connie is really a superwoman, basically. Um, the strength that
Okay.
she exuded, like I had no idea that she was going through so much sorrow, that she was harboring all that sorrow. I actually thought that she was good because every time you asked her how she was feeling, she'd always say that she was good. So to know that she wasn't good, to read this book and to see that she wasn't good, it was mind-boggling. So basically, I guess in all fairness, she was beautifully broken, but she got through it, and it was good to see the transition, how the transformation, how she went from broken to, I guess, to having everything put, not really put behind her, but to have it placed in perspective.
Kitsy, what did you learn about Connie? What did you learn about grief?
Well, what I learned, I don't want to say that I learned about Connie. I already knew that Connie was strong. She's always been upfront and strong. I'm just glad she took all her power and put it to pen and showed the world who she is. You know, she's always been a shero, and she can do anything she puts her mind to. So she took that power, and where she thought she was weak. And as you can see in one of the chapters, she thought she lost her whole world, but she
Wow.
turned that into success and made this happen. You know, with strength and help from God, we can do anything, and she showed that. And she's always been that. I can speak to that with confidence because that's been my friend for a long time.
Hello. Sabrina, what did you learn about Connie?
What I learned about Connie was her transparency in sharing her emotions about her grief, and also about how she overcame something that we all can relate to, and just overall how she made the book relatable to her readers.
Okay, so we are overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. Connie has testified. I'm sorry, but y'all know I'm in the church, so it's gonna come out every now and then. So it just came out. Thank you, Jesus. It had to come out. But Connie, I'm gonna tell you what I learned. I learned, Connie, that you can be anything, and you went through so much sorrow and suffering. And I remember, I have to apologize when I came and saw what happened to your mother. I didn't really know what to do because, like Renee said, you so strong, and then when you wanted to break out, I really didn't know what to do. So I want to apologize if I wasn't there for you the way I should have. And if I didn't embrace you and love you like I can, I'm going to make it up now and be there for you. I have to say that. So I'm going to go to the next question. And it's in chapter 5. And it's about the homegoing. And the question is, Connie, how and what did you really learn about grief in the homegoing service? Tell us what I know is in the book, but tell the people because they haven't got this book, and y'all need to go ahead and get the book. And I'm going to show you how to get the book later. But Connie, tell us a little bit more about that.
Sometimes when you pray to God and you're asking God for something, and you put it in God's hands, and you say, "Do let it be in Your will." It doesn't always necessarily mean that it's going to be what you actually prayed for. A lot of times, and I shouldn't say a lot of times, all the time, it's going to be what God willed it to be. And just because you pray for healing, it doesn't necessarily mean that your loved one is going to be healed. Sometimes healing is also passing. Because if you believe in Jesus Christ and you understand that when you die and you die in Christ, you're going to be renewed. There's not going to be any more sickness. There's not going to be any more sadness. You're going to be brand new with God. So sometimes when you pray for healing, like I prayed for my mother, I prayed for healing, but the healing didn't necessarily come in her getting a kidney or not being sick anymore. Healing actually came from death. So, healing isn't always health of the body or renewing. It's sometimes it's death.
Okay, so I'm going to go to chapter 9, and chapter 9 talks about transition. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to Sabrina, and I want to ask you. No, I want to. Y'all want Sabrina to talk about this first? Tell us what transition mean, and then kind of can you back her up when she talk about transition? I mean, what the bow break means. I'm sorry. What does the bow break mean? That's transitioning. So Sabrina, talk to us about that.
As far as what the bow break means to me, it means to me when an event in life happens and you feel like your world has spiraled out of control and there is no return. And as far as the transitioning is when we move from the other emotions and we start going into another phase where we try to make things different in our life and start to go into another place where we try to accept what's going on in our life. And I want to speak about chapter 9 as far as the butterfly that she spoke of, something that she and her sister both experienced. And to me, that symbolized that there's life after death and that her mother was okay. It was basically God telling her that her mother was okay. And the reflection of the butterfly was basically a remembrance of her mom. So that just goes to show us that, there is life after death.
Renee, I'm going to Renee now. What does the bow break
Oh,
mean
I
to
thought you
you?
said Connie was going to speak.
Oh, I'm
What did you
sorry,
want me to
Connie. Go
answer?
ahead, Connie. I apologize. Forgive me. Connie, go ahead.
Well, Sabrina was spot on, but in the book, When the Bow Breaks, it's actually me talking about my support system. Even though I'm an adult woman and I'm married and I'm no longer in the house, me and my sister had a beautiful relationship with our mother. And my mom had been there for me and Cynthia through the good times, the bad times, everyday times. I mean, we talked every day. We talked about politics. We talked about live. We talked about game shows, stuff on TV. We talked all the time. And so my whole world, 50 something years old, my whole world, all I always had was my mom and my dad. So when my mom passed, that was very, very traumatic to me. And it was like my support system was gone. I didn't recognize anything about my world that I thought was perfect and was what I had always come to be accustomed to. I didn't recognize anything. So my support system, as what I knew it, was gone.
Okay, Kitsy, what does the bow break mean to you?
What I guess just to continue on with, I took it from the nursery rhyme of when the bough breaks, the cradle falls, and with the mother being the bough, she was the actual one that held the cradle. So
Wow.
when it broke, that kind of broke ties of everything, and that was my take on that. And just to add to that, I think we've had a discussion as well, like the current situations that people are dealing with now with the COVID, where families are being kind of left to linger. They're being dropped off at hospitals and dropped off at places
Yeah.
and never seen again. So it's like the bow is actually breaking from that. You never get to see your family again because they're sick and they're in rest, whatever they're going with all these breathing treatments and never get to be seen again until they're lying in a casket at a graveside
Wow.
cemetery.
Yeah.
So I mean that to me is like the bow breaking, and it's continuously breaking day after day as long as we're still in this turmoil with this COVID-19.
Wow.
Right.
So what I want to jump to now, I want to jump into chapter 11, which is the message. But you know what? I didn't ask everybody. Did anybody else want to talk about what the bow break meant to them? What does that actually mean? Or kind of, you want to elaborate some more? You want to give us your perception on that?
Well, I want to allow Renee to speak because I believe she has something that she wanted to say to touch on this. Renee?
The birthday girl.
Well, for me, when I think about when the bow breaks, for me it was almost like when the levees broke in Louisiana, or the torrential rains that just happened not long ago in the Bahamas, and how there was just so much chaos and then life altering occurrences. So you have to learn how to put things back together after all of that devastation, and it's hard. In her book, for me, it referenced how to actually get through the process, certainly with the self-help things in here, the self-help points. So, but that's what it meant for me. But reading it, and it was almost in correlation. So it was still the same thing for me. A lot of devastation, but ways to get through it, to cope.
Next, we're going to go on to the next message. Chapter 11 talks about the message. What surprised you most? And did you get what intrigued you about the book? Let's talk about that. Let's start with Renee. Renee, I know it's your birthday and we have you to talk a little bit more, but can you talk about that part? What surprised you most about the book and what intrigued you? Or was you like getting jittery about going to the next page?
Well, the whole book was captivating for me. Like when I got my book, I read it from beginning to end. I couldn't put it down. It was just that interesting for me. She basically put everything in perspective, and it was just such a great self-help book. And I certainly encourage anyone that's going through any tough times concerning a loss to read it. It's really worth the read.
Kitsy, what
Um,
intrigued you?
like the message for me it just brought it home. It made it plain and clear. The Like I said, the self-help book was great for understanding the message. Just summed it up for me. I like the way Connie put the poems, the Bible scriptures, and whatnot in
Yes.
throughout the chapters. So it made it an easy read and gave you time to think about a lot of things, and you had the opportunity to write notes and go back and reflect in the book on different things she talked about. Like I say, when you're going through, if you can just put pen to paper and just don't lift the pen, just write what you're feeling at that moment, and then go back
Right.
and review it later. You'll be surprised at what you come out with.
Right.
It's
Sabrina?
it's like having a talk with God, but just write.
Like everyone has pretty much said, the book itself was to me very therapeutic. It was very engaging, and like Renee said, or Kitsy said, at the end of each chapter, there was an area, exercise after each book where you can actually write your thoughts down. And overall, the content of the book to its entirety, I mean, it was very good. And I would also encourage everyone to get this book, regardless of if you lost someone or have had some type of illness that you suffered grief through. It is a book to have in your library.
And I want to say, just to ditto on what you said, Renee, thank you for saying that it's like a self help book. And Kissy saying is like, at the end of every chapter, listen, viewers, you will be able to write down your thoughts. And like Sabrina said, you won't even know who wrote it. I mean, with me, I was like, okay, this is what I wrote. But Connie, I want to say I appreciate the way you wrote the book. It is like a self help book. I want to say that. But I want to say how I experienced loss is I lost a baby. And I couldn't seem to get past not being able to leave the hospital with my baby. And I remember Yvette Jackson, and I know y'all know her. She was like, Barbara, you can make it through it, but she don't understand the misery was deep within me. I was like so sad for a long time. Even though I was laughing with everybody, I really went through a sense of distress. And kind of in the book, it kind of like brought the feelings back. But I thought about when you look at grief, joy is on the other side of grief. And that's what you did. So, which brings me to my next question, Connie. I want to talk to you about this. I know you wrote the book, but what was your favorite chapter in the book? If you had to say, you know what, this is not even my book, I know you wrote it. What is your favorite chapter in the book, Connie?
Well, actually, I have two chapters that I really enjoy, but I guess I would have to say my favorite chapter would be in bondage. If you've
Okay.
had the opportunity to read that book and read that chapter, in bondage actually was a turning point for me. It was my transition, my start to transitioning to healing. So I'd have to say that in bondage, even though I tried to make it as authentic as possible and for my readers to feel exactly what I felt and to be in the moment with me, that was a transitioning point for me in my favorite chapter.
Okay, Connie, I'm sorry. Everybody, we need to step to the side for 1 second. We have a question from the outside, and they wanted to know. Let me see what this says. They said, "What advice would you give someone comparing grief to COVID-19?"
What would I give someone
Wait a
comparing?
minute. Wait a minute. Hold on. Grief to COVID-19. What's your advice? Grief and COVID-19.
Well, regardless if it's COVID-19 related or some other form, medical condition or situation that caused this unimaginable devastation in the loss of your loved one. Remember what I said, there are 5 stages, and there are no particular order for these stages to go in. So, regardless if your loved one died of COVID-19 or your loved one died of a heart attack, cancer, or whatever, grief is still the same. The pain is still the same. But what I will say about it is, with the families that are going through COVID-19 losses, it's a little bit harder to deal with for the simple reason that the way the process is happening, the state have certain requirements. When you die of COVID-19, you have things like you have to be buried in 24 hours. You can't go and be by your loved one's bedside when they're in distress. So those things right there actually, have, in my opinion, makes the grief even more difficult to bear because we're so accustomed to being with our loved ones when we're going through. We're so accustomed to when somebody passes, we're gonna have a wake. We're gonna meet with our family. We're gonna break bread. We're gonna eat. We're gonna hug each other and all of that. But with COVID-19 and the restrictions that came upon people who were passing as a result of COVID-19, it took all of that away. So it took a lot of our culture away from what we're accustomed to. So I guess it would be even more harder, but the grief process itself is the same.
Renee, do you have some? Well, I'm going to ask the masters. Someone said a question about grief and COVID-19. Does any one of the masters, do you want to talk about an experience or give some comfort to someone about that?
Was that for
No?
me?
No, anybody. Kissy, you can go first.
Oh, okay. Well, my thing is, I just had my uncle just passed last week from COVID-19, and he was in the hospital for about 2 months. And he went to the hospital, and the process was that he was alone during that time. He got out of ICU, and they said he was doing great. And then they had to move him back up to ICU where he wasn't doing great anymore. So he never got a chance to see his family ever again from that process. So, the next time we had the opportunity to see him was at graveside. And it's a process when my thing is, I thought he was lonely. I was worried about him being alone. He didn't have the chance to say, he didn't get a chance to say, I love you, I miss you, Godspeed, any of that stuff, let me pray over you, none of that was able to, we weren't able to share that with him, so it's just a tough time. But we have to continue to get stronger as family, as a community, and we have to pray for one another every day because tomorrow's not promised. And we need God in our life. Somehow, some way, we got to pray for one another.
Yeah.
Sabrina?
Yes, I would like to say that in this situation it's really difficult because now we are not able to go and visit each other. So I can only imagine what someone is going through in this. But what I would recommend is that we try to do Zoom conferences or something that we can try to keep in touch and encourage each other to talk with each other since we cannot visit in person, and just to continue to pray and just show our support in any other way that we can in this time. It's interesting how we have to now think of ways to be creative to stay connected.
Right. Renee?
I just piggybacking to what Sabrina's saying, just try to keep the lines of communication open. I personally don't know anyone that passed away from COVID, and but I've known people that's had it and had long roads to recovery, and it is heart wrenching. So basically, just it's another layer of grief that you will
Right.
encounter, that people that of course have to deal with this has to encounter. And I don't know, for me, I honestly don't know how I would be able to just not be able to say goodbye.
Yeah.
So I just pray that everybody just stay safe. And I don't ever want to have to deal with that emotion. I don't.
Right.
Connie, do you have something else you want to say? Did it something else come up? I don't want to overlook. Maybe you had something else to say.
Yeah, I want to caveat on what Chrissy said and Renee. Dealing with COVID-19, one of the bigger things that you hear people talk about that's really devastating is the opportunity to say goodbye. And
Right.
I actually kind of touch on that in the book too. That was something that was very heart wrenching for me. It happened. My mother passed happened so suddenly. I didn't get the opportunity to say goodbye, and that's something that is really, really hard when you're going through the loss of a loved one. That opportunity to say goodbye.
So I want to shift because I
Wait,
see
can I say
somebody else.
something?
Go ahead, Kitsy.
Can I say something, Barbara?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was just saying, even in the midst of this, and we were talking about ways to still communicate. We got to remember to our elderly, and we have to reach out to them because they don't know about all this Zoom and all this telephone stuff that we still got to find a way to communicate with our elderly and keep them involved as much as we possibly can. I mean, pass by, blow the horn or something, tell them to come to the screen door, do what you can. But we got to remember our seniors and we got to be there for them as well.
Right, right. So
It's hard for
I'm
them too.
It is. It's very hard for them too. And we have to really, like you said, we have to reach out some type of way. Sabrina, thank you for bringing that out. We have to be creative in this day and time when it comes to grief because some people, they won't express what they're going through. They just gonna take it and be suffering. And then next thing you know, I don't want to bring the subject up about somebody just passed away. I don't want to bring that up. But anyway, some people can really, really be going through and they don't want to talk about it. Which
Right.
brings me to chapter 12, final reflections. And is Connie, what advice would you give someone who wants to take your path in writing this book? And what is next for you?
Okay. Before I answer those two questions, I wanna go back to something that you said. Um, a lot of times people don't like to open up and let you know just where they are really with dealing with grief. But there are symptoms that you can actually look for. When you're looking for grief symptoms, look for tiredness. That individual might be extremely tired. Tiredness signifies that they're not getting any sleep. There may be a spike in weight loss or weight gain. They may be experiencing aches and pains, and they may even have some nausea. So a lot of times, if they were like me, if you asked me how I was doing at that time, I told you I was fine. But if you had looked at me really closely, I was gaining weight, I was having mood swings, I wasn't sleeping well. So there are symptoms that you can pay attention to when you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with grief. Now, your question you asked me, I believe you asked me, ask that question again, Barbara. I'm sorry.
What advice would you give someone that wants to take your path and writing the book? And what is next for you? But I want to. Can I say one thing, Connie and
Mhm.
Renee? I want you to talk about this. Have you experienced not being able to tell somebody how you felt when it came to grief? I want to. I want to. I think that kind of you got to have another table talk because this like really brought out something. Thinking about COVID-19, Renee, have you ever experienced? I don't want to put you on the spot, and then I want to ask everybody: have you been the person? Because we need to let people know. I've been there before, not being able to tell somebody that I was going through.
Can I take this one? Can I take this one first?
Yes.
That's where I was with this whole process. I didn't tell anybody I was going through. I couldn't find the right words to even communicate what I was feeling, let alone what I was thinking. So even being in the house with my husband, he was right by my side 24/7, but he didn't even understand that I was going through that level of of grief because I couldn't communicate. It was literally, like I tell you in the book, it was like being in a strange land where you did not recognize the people. I did not recognize the language. I could not communicate exactly what I was feeling. But what's interesting about it is when I started to write this book, when I started actually journaling and writing this book, all of those words that I wasn't able to say when I was actually going through, what I was actually going through and feeling, actually come out in this book. So I was able to give my emotions and feelings real words in this book.
So you were able to give it a face. Renee,
Yes.
did you have something to say on that part? Not being able to talk, because Sabrina, you next. I'm just trying to make sure I ask everybody. Did you come to a point? I know this is not this show is not called The Real. This is the Table Talk. I know it's a show called The Real, but we're gonna be real. Have you been in that position?
Well, actually, I experienced it with Connie because every time I asked her how she was doing, she was always good, when in essence she wasn't. And then even for me with my grandbaby, with the death of my little guy, I I put on a suit every day, went to work, smiled. And there were times when I'd just be sitting at my desk and just start crying out of nowhere. I didn't know where those emotions was coming from, but I didn't talk to anybody about it because it was just something that I knew in time it would heal itself, or I get through it, I get over it. And that's exactly what happened. It took a while, but I got there. So, and it's easy to not have those conversations with people because everybody don't know the right thing to tell you.
Say that
Um,
again.
and some people think you should grieve 1 or 2 weeks and be good, but that's
Right.
not the case.
Sabrina?
Um, as for me, in the past I've had a tendency to internalize everything and just be quiet. And even if someone asks me about how I'm feeling, I'll just say I'm well, because if you can imagine, after losing, two people who raised you, and it's like you now have to muster up strength to be your voice and just keep everything bottled inside. It was like I would just say I was well, but inside I wasn't. And I'll say this, which I didn't disclose before. I believe that as a result of that, it actually turned into illness over time. And I'm a cancer survivor. So if you can
Oh.
imagine losing an organ, I went through grief with that, and still, putting on the face, and my kids looking at me thinking everything is okay, but I actually wasn't. I was still trying to figure out how to cope with the new normal of life. And over time I did get through it. And I would just say to anyone that it's best to either seek counseling or to even get help, self-help books to help you. And I just wish that when I was going through my grief and depression, that I had Connie's book to help me through it, because I can tell you now, like you said earlier, Barbara, it was something that I still could relate to. And it's one of those books that you can pick up.
Okay, we are back, Connie. Are you ready? Can you give us a final reflection, please?
Absolutely. You asked the question about what's next. Actually, you heard me say that I am the founder of Push Publishing, Pray Until Something Happens. So that's actually the next project. I want to actually get this completely up and running and off the ground. It's not even 30 days old. So that's actually what's next. And I'm also wearing a t-shirt. So I'm in the process of starting working on some products, Win About Break products, some coffee mugs and some t-shirts. So that's what's next for Win About Break.
Okay, ladies, do you have a final reflection that you want to talk about the book? I think, Connie, you might have to have a table talk too. I don't know, but ladies, do you have anything that you want to add in as a final reflection of When the Bow Breaks?
I just want to say that I'm extremely proud of Connie, for writing the book, for the content of the book. And I'm just super proud of you, girl. Just super, super proud. And I can't wait for book number 2.
Sabrina?
I would like to also say congratulations, Connie, to When the Bow Break. I pray that it will be a bestseller. I know that it will. And I would just encourage everybody that's out here watching to pick up a copy. And even if you have not experienced any type of loss, maybe with a parent or what have you, give someone this book and bless someone with it, because it's a very good readable book, and it's well written with full of content where you cannot put it down. So again, congratulations, Connie.
Thank you. Can I say something? Can I say something? Well, I like to thank the panelists as well as the moderator. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me. I am like so full right now that I don't know what to do. I just want to get up out of my chair and just jump for joy. But God put this in my heart to do. I didn't set out to do this. I didn't even know I was going to do this. And it just happened. And I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful for you guys being a part of this journey. I'm grateful for all of the people that have already purchased my book. I'm grateful for the people who are contemplating on purchasing my book. I'm just grateful. And thank you so much, Barbara, for this opportunity. Thank you, Kitsy. Thank you, Sabrina. And thank you, Renee. And most of all,
Thank you.
thank you, audience. Thank you so much for, staying with me through this whole process and sitting through this. Thank you. It's very much so appreciated. Love you guys. Thank you so much.
We love you too.
We love you too.
Love you too. Like it. And
Love you
thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Smooches.
Smooches. And happy birthday, Renee.
Thank
Happy
you. Can't wait to turn
birthday.
up. Can't wait for my bow to
Thank you,
break.
Barbara, Faith in Action Ministries, Kitsy, Sabrina, and Renee for a wonderful discussion. To my audience, thank you for tuning in, and remember, the bow will break, you will fall, but you can and will recover. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Connie Standifer. Be sure to visit my website and purchase your book at www.conniedstandifer.com. I'm Connie Standifer, and remember, the unimaginable grief in the loss of a loved one does not have to be infinite. The struggle is real, but you can and will recover.
We know that is the end of the bow break. And ladies, I want you to say goodbye to everyone. We want to wave and we want to say thank you to everyone that hung in there with us for this time. And Connie, we want you to say the last words before we turn off. We know Renee is going to turn up, but we're going to turn off.
I
Well,
can't hear her.
again, thank you guys so much. Thank you, audience, for tuning in with us and sticking with us through all this technical difficulty stuff. But for the most part, thank you to my beautiful panelists. Thank you to my wonderful moderator. And thank you, God. Thank you for giving me this gift.
Yeah.
Thank you for seeing me through this. And I'm just grateful. Thank you so much.
Bye.
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 Thank you, Barbara, Faith in Action Ministries, Kitsy, Sabrina, and Renee for a wonderful discussion. To my audience, thank you for tuning in, and remember, the bow will break, you will fall, but you can and will recover. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Connie Standifer. Be sure to visit my website and purchase your book at www.conniedstandifer.com. I'm Connie Standifer, and remember, the unimaginable grief in the loss of a loved one does not have to be infinite. The struggle is real, but you can and will recover.